our history. Buildings and people and memories and dreams. Who better to tell us than those who were there? There's so much to learn from the stories they'll share.
Living history. Living history.
Hello, and welcome to Living History with Ted Goldsboro. Today we have Ed Minshall with us, and Ed's family is mother and father and uncle, and even Ed worked for a company called the Autocar Company,
Right.
which was in Ardmore. And Ed and I are going to be talking about the Autocar Company and the family that was involved with it, named the Clark, C-L-A-R-K-E, put that E on the end, the Clark family. Before we begin, I wanted to remark that the Clark family came from Pittsburgh.
Right.
And they were quite prominent. Some people have heard of the Johnstown flood. The Clarks, along with several other famous people like Henry Clay Frick and other people that were very prominent in Pittsburgh, had summer homes along a lake. And that dam broke on that lake, and that's what caused the Johnstown flood. So the Clark family was very prominent. And Ed, why did they happen to come to Ardmore? Why didn't they stay out in Pittsburgh?
Well, the father started it in Pittsburgh. It was called Pittsburgh Motor Car Company. But they were intending to get into something bigger, like transportation vehicles. And it wasn't suitable where they were. They looked at the main line outside of Philadelphia, and they saw Ardmore. They saw the railroad running parallel to Route 30 West, which was the main highway in those days. So the two main routes were available right there, and you could put your factory right between them. And Ardmore is the place where they came the closest. In the back of the Ardmore factory was a loading dock, and some of the product would be loaded right onto, there was this little siding, right onto the railroad. As you know, the proximity of the railroad is right there. And so they settled in there in 1900, and I think you have a picture of the very first. Oh well, this is where the Clarks settled in their home. Where Lewis Clark. This is Lewis Clark's home, and that's a picture of. I guess it's a picture of Lewis Clark.
Yes, it is.
And he restored this to take that picture. That's one of the first four-wheel. It had a.
What did they have before the four-wheel?
They had a three-wheel. It looked like a glorified motorcycle, three-wheel motorcycle. It had a centrifugal clutch, and it was used to deliver packages, as I recall. That was the idea. Of course, we quickly went into something bigger, and there were a lot of firsts Autocar did along the way. You know.
We'll have to talk about some of those first.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I believe that tricycle was given to the Smithsonian.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And it appeared in 1997 down Greensboro at a special truck meet, and it was featuring Autocar's 100th anniversary, and they showed that thing alongside of a very big Autocar diesel. The first one and the present one.
Right.
There's quite a difference.
Now, did Mr. Clark and his brother, John Clark, did they build houses in Lower Merion?
I don't know.
Yeah, they did.
Did they?
Yeah. This house is on Avon Road at New Gulf Road.
Right.
Still built, and in fact, a family bought it and restored it. And it looks beautiful. And then the brother, Joe, this is Lewis Clark. And Lewis, I understand, was kind of the innovator. He was the engineer.
Correct. He was an engineer.
Okay.
And he hired a lot of good engineers around him. That's why the company was so successful. That was his deal. He was an inventor, actually. I would call him an inventor.
And several patents.
Yes, he has quite a few patents.
Okay.
And, some of them. Well, for instance, the Autocar was the first shaft-driven car. Prior to that, it was chain. Everybody. It was the first. They won races with that. They were a big part of developing the porcelainized spark plug. porcelain for insulation. Prior to that, it had been the electrode went down, and there was a level of fiber discs. That was insulator, but they were prone to leakage, and when it was damp, the spark would leak, the engine would miss, and so forth. So they had that to their credit. And first artillery wheels, that means not spoke wheel, but a disc wheel. There's just many things that
The oil pump?
Oil pump circulated instead of gravity or splash for the engine. The steering, Lewis Clark started the steering on the left side of the car, because in America everybody drove down the right side, but everybody else was doing it on the right side, and you weren't out in the center of the road, you couldn't see good. He had to go back to that, but he got fed up with that only a few years, and he went back to the left, and he drew the whole industry into putting the driver on the left side of the car. In
the
America,
way it is today.
The way it is today.
Yeah.
The way it is every place
So
in the world
really
except
all
England.
the cars in America.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Now, his brother John lived in a beautiful house which had been the Owl bookstore of Bryn Mawr College, but now it's part of the admissions office up in Bryn Mawr. So that house is still there, and it's been restored.
By the way, John was the financial guy in that.
Yes, John was the financial guy.
And,
yes.
Lewis was the.
Now this is a picture of today's
Yes.
house, and it's the same house that
Right.
we saw earlier. This picture here with those three windows is right there. So you can see how it was in 1905.
Notice they got rid of the ivy on all
Yes,
those.
yes. Well, they restored the house.
Yeah, right.
And there have been some articles, even in the Mainline Times, there was an article about a fundraising event. And there's a 1907, I believe, is that a 1907? Bill Schwabel's.
Yeah, it looks very much like it. It's hard to tell exactly what year, but that.
I believe that's Bill Schwabel's.
Now notice where the steering wheel is on the right side. See, that's the cars and so forth were all doing that. And
Okay.
he's the guy that bucked the tide and
Put it back on the left, put it on the left.
Right.
And this is the Owl bookstore, the one that has been restored.
I think
by,
I've seen that, but I didn't realize that.
Now, when Autocar opened up their factory on Lancaster Avenue in Ardmore, there was just one building.
That was the first building, 1900.
Okay.
That was it. That was it.
And there's an old car down there in the
You can
front.
see the stacks up here, ventilators. I mean,
Yes.
there was definitely a factory. The offices in the front part of the building and the back part on the railroad.
When you look at this building and compare it
looks
to,
like a
what
home.
to what it became,
Yeah.
it's hard to believe that it started that size.
Know what else is hard to believe? I guess they hated to part with history, but that building was there at the time of the fire, at the end of the period when Autocar ended, and they just added stuff.
Yes,
just added
we're going to see that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're going to see how the buildings now. This is I think, is that the original building?
Yeah,
Because it's got that.
that's the original building right in there.
So
and then
there
this
you can
is,
start
this
to
is
see.
more like a factory alongside.
All right.
And then in 1920, oh well, we're not get to that yet.
And
This
it
is a
shows you-
machine shop. Yeah, this is a machine shop. How it looked. See the overhead belts and all that stuff in the old days. Obviously,
Would you have one power source instead of a whole bunch of electric?
Well, yeah, you had several power sources, but each power source served a lot of machines.
Okay, so it was
Through
more
the
efficient.
Network of belts. So you can see the
Okay.
overhead belts
Okay.
coming down to each machine.
And the name
In other
plate.
words, one shaft all the way through, many belts. So you might have power source out here, power source on this side of the line.
Okay, and they've had belts came down.
Yes. Right.
Okay. The Autocar, and you
Yeah.
corrected. You know, when I first got involved with this, I used to just call it Autocar. You said no, it's the Autocar. You know, the Autocar.
The Autocar. It's all I ever heard when I was a kid. My dad would refer to something social and say, "Oh, that's the Autocar gang. They're going to do this or that." You know, when it had.
Now, was Autocar prominent in America? I mean, were there lots of
Oh yeah,
companies?
I mean, you have pictures here of Autocars from East Coast to West Coast. You have pictures of police cars.
Mm-hmm.
As far
Lower
west.
Merion had them too.
Yeah, Autocar police cars out in California.
Mm-hmm.
So they were really intending to go nationwide, and they did early in the game.
What's this down here, Ed?
Oh, they're factory branches? Yeah.
Could you name
Yeah.
us?
Oh, yeah. I can name some that are local. Of course, there was the big one in Philadelphia. There's New York. There were several in New York. Pittsburgh, naturally. And around the Philadelphia branch were several satellite branches to serve the community. Bryn Mawr, Chester. I ended up in my tenure with Autocar. It was my last job with Autocar. I was for about 1 year before the merger, I was a manager of the Chester branch, which is pretty old. It's an old historic. The building's probably still there. When I was there, we just had the bottom of the building and to the corner for the office. Upstairs was all apartments, but upstairs used to be storage and a warehouse and everything, and it was a drive-through from Barclay Street, 5th Street and Barclay. And it was pretty neat, pretty old facility. And that was as late as '53.
Okay. Now, Autocar made cars before they made trucks?
Yes, they started, well, that first one was meant to be a delivery vehicle, the first three-wheel one, but they got into cars because, remember, it was called the Pittsburgh the Pittsburgh Motor Car Company.
So for like 6 or 8, 10 years they made cars?
Up until 1910.
Okay.
That's sort of the...
Okay,
up
so
until
around
1910.
12 years or 13 years. Okay.
And then, remember, the first car they made in Ardmore was sold to some doctor, and I can't think
Gerhardt.
Yeah.
At Bryn Mawr Hospital.
From Bryn Mawr.
Yeah.
It states that in their history.
Right.
That was the first car sold.
But then after like 1911, they started with trucks.
Yeah, right.
And then they stopped the cars and went with trucks.
Right.
Now, we've been talking living history here, and we're with Ed Minshall, and we're talking about Autocar, and we'll be right back after this.